The story begins on a bright summer day at the Avengers mansion in New York City. Jarvis was pouring a cup of coffee for the Wasp, while Captain Britain was enjoying her lunch. Ant-Man asks Hawkeye who is his favorite woman that he could never have, and Clint says Madam Hydra is very sexy, especially with her green hair and green leather. She-Hulk listened in on the conversations and called him a pig, but Clint says he can't help but have a thing for her, maybe because of all the green. Their friendly banter was cut short when an unidentified person destroyed one of the walls and entered the compound. It was Jack of Hearts, a former Avenger who was killed some time ago, but something was very wrong. He looked barely alive, resembling a zombie, but managed to speak and say he was sorry. Then out of nowhere, his body exploded, destroying a big portion of the mansion and instantly killing Ant-Man. The other Avengers recovered unharmed, but they had no idea what just happened. They went outside and found a giant crater where Jack of Hearts exploded, but there was no sign of Ant-Man. The only thing left of him was his skinless hand. Meanwhile, across town, Iron Man is addressing the United Nations in his capacity as U.S. Secretary of Defense, but he gets distracted when he sees the delegate from Latveria. Tony loses control and goes all out on the delegate, calling the Latveria leader a terrorist and saying they need to unite their forces and wipe that country off the face of the map. He was taken off stage and he tells Wanda he has no idea what came over him. He swears he is not drunk, saying he has been clean for many months now. Wanda gets an alert on her phone, the Avengers Code White, the highest priority call asking all available members to come to the mansion. S.H.I.E.L.D. had already surrounded the mansion and was securing the area when Captain America noticed something in the sky. The Vision was piloting one of the Quinjets and was flying towards them, but he wasn't slowing down. He crashes inside the mansion, creating yet another explosion, but this time, nobody was injured. The Vision emerges from the fire and says he is sorry, but he no longer controls his body. And just like with Jack of Hearts, his face looked different. He opens his mouth and spits out several metal balls while the captain asks everyone to fall back. These metal balls transform into many Ultron-shaped robots that instantly attack the Avengers. Captain America leads the attack and jumps on one of the drones, managing to take it down. He then uses his shield to decapitate it, telling everyone to go for their heads. Hawkeye, the Falcon, and She-Hulk followed the captain's orders and took out more of the drones. But something wasn't right, and She-Hulk began to lose control, taking her rage out on Vision and prompting her to ask him why Ant-Man was killed. But Vision was already dead and couldn't reply, so she broke his body in half. But she didn't stop there and continued her attacks on the other Avengers, throwing a truck on top of the captain. Eventually, Iron Man arrives and knocks her out with a strong punch right to her jaw. The aftermath of this whole incident was devastating. Ant-Man and the Vision were both dead, while Captain Britain, She-Hulk, and the Wasp were all hospitalized. Tony Stark believes that everything that happened today is connected, including what happened to him at the United Nations, but Hank Pym doesn't believe him, saying he was there and Tony was drunk. Tony used to be an alcoholic, but says he stopped drinking, and he was sober today, but the others didn't trust him, so he flew away. The captain wanted to return to the mansion to investigate the site for possible clues, trying to make sense of everything that happened today, but he was greeted with a shocking sight. The Avengers SOS that was sent out earlier today was heard by all the heroes in the country, and they all responded. Black Panther says they were all Avengers at one point in time and they all came to offer their support, but Colonel Fury wasn't too thrilled about this. He says that the mansion is a crime scene and they are all interfering with possible evidence and asks them to leave. Out of nowhere, a giant Kree ship appeared in the sky and launched an attack on New York. As if this day wasn't bad enough, the heroes were now faced with an impending Kree invasion, and everyone sprung into action. Luckily, all of the heroes were gathered in New York City, and Hawkeye says they picked the wrong day to screw with the Avengers. Clint goes on a solo rampage against the Kree, killing as many as he could with his bow, but he was shot in the back with a powerful energy blast. He says he doesn't want to go down like a coward, and jumps on one of the Kree soldiers that had a jetpack. Together they launch themselves into the air and fly directly into the giant spaceship, causing a giant explosion that breaks the ship in half. This forces the Kree soldiers to retreat, but sadly Hawkeye was killed in the explosion. But something wasn't right again. The spaceship wasn't made out of metal, but something none of them could explain. That's when Doctor Strange arrives and says the nature of these attacks is magic, and everything that happened today is connected. Many months ago, the Wasp and Wanda Maximoff were enjoying a beautiful day beside the pool, and Janet says she thought she was pregnant because her period was late. Luckily, it was a false alarm, because it's literally impossible for an Avenger to have children, and Wanda thought she could have two. Wanda asks her what she meant by that, but Janet quickly changed the subject, saying she's going inside because she needs to pee. But Wanda knew she was hiding something from her. Doctor Strange says that Wanda was behind the attack today because she is the only one strong enough to do this. She is Magneto's daughter, and she was born with incredible powers that she did not earn, powers she never fully understood or was able to control. Her powers allow her to change reality, and even create things that aren't real. She wanted to have children, but because she couldn't have them naturally, she created them. With help from Agatha Harkness, they were able to wipe her memory and make her forget that tragic event. But every time Wanda uses her powers to alter reality, she loses control over her mind. Strange leads the heroes to where Wanda was hiding, and together they confront her. But Wanda created villains and former allies and forced them to fight each other. She used her powers to create her children once again, and watched as the heroes attacked each other. But Doctor Strange confronts her and asks her to stop this madness because she is hurting her friends and herself. She refused to back down, saying she won't allow him to take her children away from her ever again. Strange powered up and used the Eye of Agamotto to show her the truth, saying she will stop this madness, and that these magics are not hers to abuse. This causes Wanda to black out and drop from the sky, but the captain ran towards and caught her before she hit the ground. Because her mind was already in a delicate place, Strange was able to put her to sleep, and Magneto came to pick up his daughter. Magneto says that Xavier was right. She was behind all these attacks, and he is sorry. The heroes ask him where he plans on taking her, but he didn't say anything and just flew away together. The heroes gathered inside the Avengers mansion to remember the fallen heroes. Ant-Man, Vision, and Hawkeye all lost their lives because Wanda's mind deteriorated so much to the point where she was a danger to the entire world. She-Hulk blames herself for killing the Vision, but Janet says it wasn't her fault. His body was already destroyed by Wanda when she broke him in half. Sadly, after everything that happened at the United Nations, Tony Stark lost all of his credibility and support inside the government and says he doesn't have the funds to support the Avengers anymore. He was literally using half of his fortune to keep the Avengers alive. Keeping the mansion running wasn't cheap. The Avengers agree to disband and begin talking about their future plans away from this place. Hank Pym asks Iron Man what was his best moment as an Avenger, if he had to pick just one moment. Tony says the best thing they ever did was getting together in the first place. He was still getting used to the armor and got to go on incredible adventures with his fellow teammates, including Hulk. The Wasp's greatest moment was when they found Captain America still frozen, saying they found him in the perfect moment when the country needed him the most. The rest of the heroes each remember some of their greatest moments spent as an Avenger, but sadly, all good things come to an end. They have one final dinner and Captain America gives a big toast in honor of all of their fallen Avengers, including Hawkeye, Ant-Man, Vision, Jack Hart, Swordsman, Dr. Druid, and many others. However, what followed next was a beautiful moment that none of them really expected. The people of New York City surrounded the Avengers mansion to pay their respects to the group of heroes that time and time again sacrificed their own lives to save others. The story begins with a woman crying and screaming as loud as she could because the pain was unbearable. Wanda is surrounded by her friends and family while she gives birth to 2 beautiful baby boys. Doctor Strange congratulates her while Vision says, "This is a glorious day, but something isn't right," and someone asks her to put it back. It was Professor X who tells Wanda that she has no children and that there is no one inside this room beside him and her. She made it all up using her powers. Wanda drops to the ground and starts crying while everything in the room disappears and reveals the gruesome truth that they were all alone. She is overwhelmed with grief, saying, "I killed them. I killed the Avengers. I killed my husband." Magneto visits the professor and asks him how it went, because he heard the screaming. Charles is worried and says that every time his daughter uses her powers to alter reality, she loses more of her grasp on reality, and they can't control her for much longer. Magneto blames himself for ruining his children's lives, saying that because of him and his war against the humans, he destroyed whatever hope they ever had for a decent life. He levitates and slowly flies away into the ruins of what was once the beautiful nation of Genosha. The story then jumps to New York City with Miss Marvel, the Falcon, and Wonder Man arriving at the Avengers Tower. The 3 of them are curious as to why they were called to come here, and remark it would have been much easier to fly than walk. But they weren't the only ones who were asked to come to the Avengers Tower. The X-Men also arrive and are greeted by a shocking sight. Every member of the Avengers team was waiting for them, and in the middle of all of them was Professor X. Back on Genosha, Wanda's brother, Pietro, argues with his father, saying that the Avengers and the X-Men have gathered in New York City to talk about the fate of his sister. He says they want to kill her and asks his father to do something about it. But Magneto was out of options and hasn't got a clue what to do with his daughter. Emma Frost is straightforward and tells everyone that they need to kill her. If she keeps altering reality and loses control like she did 6 months ago, she might put the entire world in danger. But Captain America opposes this decision, saying that there is always another way. But the professor isn't so sure about this. Not this time. Even Doctor Strange has no way of helping her, saying that there is nothing in the mystic arts that could help her, but he is still researching. The captain agrees with Doctor Strange and says they should continue working on finding a solution, but Emma Frost says they should vote. She is worried because if the people found out that a mutant killed the beloved Avengers 6 months ago and she was out of control, the world would turn on them even more. The captain remarks that Wanda is an Avenger, and it's ultimately the Avengers' decision. The Avengers vote to keep her alive for now, and Wolverine asks how many more of them need to die before they snap back to reality. They do decide, however, to go to Genosha and talk to Wanda to see for themselves if the situation is really this bad. They travel to the island but are greeted only by the ruins of what used to be a beautiful, safe place for mutants. The professor leads them to the building where Wanda was sleeping, but the place was abandoned. She wasn't there anymore. Someone moved her, but Emma Frost senses she is nearby. The heroes fly towards an abandoned church that was in ruins, while Doctor Strange remarks that every time Wanda uses her powers, she creates mystic patterns, but this time he wasn't feeling anything here. Just like in the building, the place looks abandoned, and there is nobody here. Out of nowhere, a powerful white light engulfed everyone and everything, and there was a moment of complete silence. Moments later, Peter Parker wakes up in his bedroom apartment, but something was very off. Someone was sleeping next to him, but it wasn't Mary Jane. He was married to Gwen Stacy, even though she was supposed to be dead. On the other side of New York City, Captain America was now over 100 years old and leaves his home, while some kids recognize him. Something happened on Genosha, and everyone's lives have changed. Scott and Emma Frost were now married and had just woken up. They eat breakfast together and talk about their lives, while having no memories of their previous lives or how they got here. This world was vastly different from the normal world. Here the mutants were the majority and controlling the world, while the normal humans were the oppressed people and called sapiens. In this reality, Wonder Man was a very famous movie star, while Miss Marvel was a superhero catching bad guys. Kitty Pryde is a junior high history teacher, teaching young mutants who was the first ever mutant. Luke Cage was just a normal human, but an underworld crime boss living in Hell's Kitchen. Wolverine has a nightmare where he is haunted by memories of his past traumas while he was still in the Weapon X program, but he wakes up to a beautiful sight. A beautiful redhead was beside him in bed wishing him good morning, but he panics and attacks her. Logan is now part of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s elite Red Guard and is romantically involved with his fellow agent, Mystique. He was flying inside a giant helicarrier several miles above New York City, but unlike his fellow X-Men, something was different about him. Logan remembered everything. All of his past memories were still intact, and he remembers what happened on Genosha. He wonders what happened to the professor, thinking that Magneto and Wanda were behind these events, and decides to jump off the helicarrier, dropping all the way from the sky and crashing on one of the buildings below. The newspapers that day talked about an event that was happening this weekend, where the House of Magnus was organizing a gala to celebrate 30 years of freedom from oppression by sapiens. Logan steals a bike and goes to the Avengers Tower, hoping to talk to them and tell them the truth about this world. But he was stopped by his fellow Red Guard agents. They think that something bad must have happened to him and want to take him back to the helicarrier, but he doesn't want to go with them and runs away. The agents chase him down and he runs on the street and gets on his bike. He jumps over several cars and is about to crash when someone appears right in front of him. The person opens his giant cloak and takes Logan into a dark place, away from the streets and emerging in Hell's Kitchen. Luke Cage was waiting for him, saying he needs to calm down and crush the tracker on the back of his head. Otherwise, the Red Guard agents will find them. Hawkeye was on edge and didn't trust Logan, so he shoots him point blank with an arrow, destroying the tracker and thinking that he killed him. But Logan recovers after being unconscious for over 30 seconds, but the tracker did its job and led the Sentinels to their hideout. In this world, the Sentinels were hunting down humans and not mutants, and the room was filled with sapiens. Cloak reacted fast and moved as many people as he could to another location, far away from the Sentinels, but sadly he didn't manage to take everyone and many people were left behind. Logan tells Luke Cage the truth about this world and what happened on Genosha, and he believes him. Cage says that a girl visited him yesterday and told him the exact same thing. Somehow a little girl named Layla Miller also knows that this world is fake and can show the truth to others. Logan believes that the only reason he remembers the world as it used to be is because his memory was wiped so many times before, and maybe his body found a way to counteract the effects. He wants to show the other X-Men the truth and takes Layla and the other people to Cyclops and Emma Frost's apartment, but nobody was home. When Emma returned, Layla showed her the truth, reliving all of her past memories and remembering what happened on Genosha. Emma was furious and blames Magneto, thinking he found a way to convince his daughter to change the world and wants to kill both of them. Logan agrees, but they need more help. Next on the list was Cyclops, and he was ambushed by Layla just as he returned home, forcing him to remember the world as it used to be. Next on the list was Peter Parker, who has a harder time dealing with the truth, because in this world he lives a perfect life with his child and Gwen Stacy. Peter was furious at Wanda and her father for doing this and vowed to kill both of them, but Logan told him to get in line. He's not the only one. Eventually, most of the heroes were shown the truth and they gathered once again to discuss their plan of attack. But the Red Guard, still S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, were still chasing Logan down. Layla made all of them remember their previous lives, and everyone wanted revenge now. The Red Guard agents bring the heroes on board one of the helicarriers, and Emma Frost uses her powers to hide themselves amongst the crew. She then mind-controlled the captain and forced him to set a course for Genosha, where the House of M was hosting the prestigious gala event. The first guest to arrive on Genosha was King T'Challa of the African Commonwealth of Wakanda, followed by none other than Victor Von Doom, the King of Latveria. Princess Aurora of Kenya was next, closely followed by King Namor of the Kingdom of Atlantis. All of the guests were greeted by Magneto and his family, his son Pietro, his daughter Lorna, his 2 grandchildren, and of course Wanda Maximoff sitting on his right. Out of nowhere, one of the giant sentinels that belonged to S.H.I.E.L.D. started to dive towards Magneto, but he was able to stop it moments before impact. All of the heroes launched their attack, using their combined powers and strength to attack Magneto and his children. While everyone was busy fighting, in another part of the island, Emma Frost, Layla, and Cloak were on a mission to find Professor Xavier and bring back his memories of the real world. But they were shocked to find a tombstone with his name written all over it. But Cloak went underground and found no coffin, saying that the professor wasn't even there. Back in the main room, She-Hulk was encouraging her teammates to keep fighting and not give up. They needed to win this fight one way or another. During the attack, Wanda was hit with a powerful blast of energy and her body began to disintegrate, prompting Pietro to scream in horror. But Doctor Strange noticed a strange light in one of the towers and goes to investigate. He finds Wanda playing inside with both of her children. She greets him and says that the person from the main hall wasn't her true self. She would never abandon her children for a stupid gala. Strange asks her if she created Layla Miller to bring them here, but she doesn't even know who that is. He wants to know what happened to Professor Xavier and how Magneto convinced her to change the world like this. Wanda tells Steven the truth, that it wasn't her father who convinced her to change the world. It was actually her brother Pietro. He knew the X-Men and the Avengers wanted to kill her because her powers were too dangerous, and she was losing her mind and wanted to protect her. Pietro asked his sister to change the world so that everyone can be happy and live a perfect life, including them. Emma Frost tells Doctor Strange to ask what happened to the professor because they couldn't find him anywhere. But before she could answer, Hawkeye shot her in the back with his arrow. Barton was angry because Wanda killed him several months ago when she lost control the first time, and demanded to know why she did it. But one of Wanda's children begins to scream and kills Barton once again, disintegrating his body completely. Wanda tells Steven that she didn't mean to do it and that she only wanted to protect her children. She can't control her powers anymore. Meanwhile, Magneto finds Emma Frost and Layla hiding and asks them why they are bothering his family. But Layla shows him the truth, bringing back all of his memories. Magneto had no idea that Pietro convinced Wanda to change the world in his name, and comes back enraged. He loses control and attacks his son using pieces of metal from the Sentinel, killing him in the attack. Wanda begins to scream her brother's name and flies directly towards him, removing her father's mouth to prevent him from talking. She uses her powers and brings back her brother from the dead, and then hugs him tightly. Wanda tells her father that Pietro only wanted for everyone to be happy, and blames everything that happened to them on him. She calls her father arrogant, saying that just because they are mutants, he thinks they are better than everyone else and deserve to rule. She gave him this world, and even when he got what he wanted, he was still a horrible man. Wanda says, they are not gods, but freaks, mutants, and he chose the mutants over his own children. And then Wanda uttered 3 words, no more mutants. She started powering up and everyone prepared for the worst, expecting her to lose control and do something drastic. What followed next was a powerful explosion that annihilated this world completely, and everything was engulfed in a white light once again. Moments later, Layla Miller wakes up in her bedroom apartment alone, and opens the window to take a fresh breath of air. Peter Parker wakes up in the Avengers Tower while Mary Jane drinks her coffee next to his bed, but he was sad because he missed Gwen Stacy. The Avengers organize a meeting once again to discuss what just happened. Even though everything seemed to be back to normal, not everyone remembered what happened. Iron Man can't remember anything, and Miss Marvel is just happy that things are back to normal. But Doctor Strange arrives and says, not quite. Back at Xavier's school for gifted youngsters, Emma Frost wakes up outside in the grass. She runs inside, passing the other X-Men, running towards the basement directly where Cerebro was located. She goes inside and puts on the headset and begins to cry in shock. Cerebro was created to locate mutant activity all over the world. but the map only shows just a few bright lights. Cyclops and Beast ask Emma to search for Wanda and Professor Xavier, but she can't find them anywhere in the world. The mutant population used to be in the millions, but now all of them just disappeared from the map. But they weren't dead either, just not mutants anymore. All of the students at the school were in great shock after discovering that they had completely lost their powers and were just normal human children now. Emma doesn't know if Wanda just deleted the mutant gene from everyone, or if she just suppressed the mutation. Xavier would know what this is, but he was missing. Pretty soon, the news traveled all over the world, with news stations from across the planet reporting the same thing, that most of the mutants had lost their powers, but nobody knows why. The X-Men go back to Genosha in hopes of finding Wanda hiding there, but they only find Magneto wandering the ruins alone. Wolverine jumps on top of him and asks where his daughter is, but he was just a normal man now after losing his powers and had no idea what happened to Wanda. He had no clue what happened to the professor or his son either, and Rogue asks everyone to let him go, saying what happened isn't his fault. Wolverine says he deserves every second of the rest of his crappy sapien life and vows to kill both of his children if he ever finds them. But Wanda Maximoff was still alive, wandering the streets of a marketplace somewhere in a distant and remote village, searching for food. Dr. Henry Pym gives an interview and talks about what just happened, saying that everyone around the world just witnessed the extinction of an entire species, and this will be sure to have an impact on the entire world and ecosystem. Sir Isaac Newton said that for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. So what will be the reaction to this tragic event? The story begins inside a quiet little church, where many people have gathered to attend the funeral of a young mutant who was killed recently in a bizarre accident. Among these people were even the X-Men like Wolverine, Nightcrawler, Emma Frost, Cyclops, Beast, and Professor Xavier. The kid's family takes the coffin to the grave, and everyone gathers around to say their final goodbyes. Professor X can't help but listen in on people's thoughts and hears what everyone is thinking about. The young boy wasn't even a part of the X-Men, but after Wanda Maximoff destroyed the mutant gene on M-Day, the mutant population was decimated, going from tens of millions of mutants around the world to just under 200 mutants in total. Mutant lives mattered now more than ever, and each new death was devastating. Cyclops talks to the boy's father and thanks him for allowing his fellow X-Men to pay their respects. However, the father was annoyed by this and said his son was just a number to them, just another mutant name they could cross off the list of barely 200 mutants left alive in the entire world. Cecily Kincaid is curious to know how the boy died, but everyone was vague about the subject. Nightcrawler tells her he was killed in a car accident at a busy intersection, a very mundane and ordinary death. She wishes she could punch him in the face for getting himself killed in such a dumb way, when there are fewer than 200 mutants left in the entire world. An old man intrigues Professor X because he can't read his mind, but it turns out that it is actually Sebastian Shaw in disguise. Shaw says he didn't know the boy, but felt that his death deserved to be marked in some way. Multiple Man asks Beast why nobody is talking about breeding programs to increase the mutant numbers again, but McCoy tells him it's because there aren't enough of them left to have sufficient genetic material to repopulate. The mutant race is basically extinct, and there is nothing left to do. It's just a matter of time now. Logan tells Scott that it takes a situation like this, where you look death in the face, to make you appreciate just how precious life is. The events that led to the downfall of the mutant population began some time ago on Genosha, where Wanda Maximoff changed the entire world into something else. The X-Men fought to change it back to normal, and they succeeded, but at what cost? In the end, Wanda uttered 3 words, barely loud enough to be heard.
No more mutants.
Some mutants died that day when they lost their powers out of nowhere, but most of them survived and were now just normal people without any special powers. Wanda made the mutant gene disappear as if it never existed. Beast took it upon himself to try and find a solution to the problem and asked for help from some of the brightest minds on the planet, including Mr. Fantastic and Iron Man, but without any luck. He then went searching all around the world for others to help him, but everyone turned him down, including Dr. Doom, MODOK, Pandemic, Sugarman, and even Mr. Sinister. Eventually, he climbed one of the highest mountains in the world in search of the High Evolutionary and found him inside a giant fortress. However, Professor Wyndham tells him the same thing, that what Wanda did is magic, and there is no way to reverse it unless he finds Wanda herself. He tells Beast to accept the truth and not waste his time, but Beast refuses to accept the truth and visits Dr. Kavita Rao, a mutant geneticist. She created a cure for mutants that turns them back into normal people, but what good is a cure with no one left to use it on? She gives him access to samples of this cure and wishes him good luck. Beast finds an old abandoned camp called Neverland, which was part of the Weapon X program many years ago. He finds hundreds of files and information on mutants that were kept prisoners there. This place was nothing more than a torture camp where mutants were experimented on, and hundreds lost their lives. But Beast was not alone there. Dark Beast shows up and says he wants to help. Dark Beast is a twisted, murderous, inhumane, and sadistic genius who comes from another Earth, a world that was ruled by Apocalypse. He was his most valuable geneticist, experimenting on mutants and devoted to creating the fittest beings for Apocalypse. McCoy knew what Dark Beast was capable of and was reluctant to work with him, but he had no choice. Dark Beast brings him up to date with everything he was working on and makes McCoy relive his most recent memories and witness horrific and despicable things. Together they arrive at an abandoned nuclear plant, but inside they find an entire hidden base called Black Womb. This place was even more despicable than the last, where people used to experiment on mutant babies. They find old video files and pictures of the horrible things that used to happen there, and Beast says that even though he wants to save the mutant race, he'd rather die than do anything like that, and he'll make sure to kill Dark Beast as well. Mr. Sinister told Dark Beast about this place, and that there is another secret section deeper inside. This place was under SHIELD surveillance ever since the project had shut down, and it was suspicious that nobody was there to greet them. But when they enter the secret room, they find all the SHIELD soldiers butchered and hanged for display. Somehow Sinister came there before them, and left them a present, an old robot programmed to kill anyone on sight. They quickly deal with the robot, but the place was another dead end. The servers had been cleaned dry by Sinister, who took all the information for himself. The two beasts continue their work and analyze the bodies of several mutants who were depowered, but they all have the same thing in common. The mutant gene is completely missing from their DNA. Beast comes up with an idea and visits Forge in Dallas. All the heroes from alternate timelines retained their powers on M-Day, including Bishop, Cable, the Sugar Man, Marvel Girl, and Dark Beast. Forge built a machine that combines mutant-detecting cerebral technology with time travel. He then used readings from artifacts that came from various futures as a baseline to scan those timelines. But the results were shocking. Either these futures no longer exist, or they do, and there are no more mutants in them. This only angers Beast even more, who refuses to accept the truth and leaves. Later, he and Dark Beast visit Lucinda Guthrie and ask her for a favor. They want to take gene samples from her. Even though Lucinda is a normal human, she is the mother of several mutants that were part of the X-Men, and Beast hopes that her DNA has traces of the unexpressed X gene. While the two of them are talking, Dark Beast tricks one of her kids into drinking a blue serum, saying it will give him superpowers again. The serum is dangerous, however, and the young boy falls to the ground unconscious. This prompts McCoy to attack Dark Beast, and the two engage in a brutal confrontation. Lucinda surprises Dark Beast from behind and shoots him in the arm, and then McCoy knocks him to the ground unconscious. Beast says he is sorry for causing her family harm, and leaves again empty-handed. Now desperate and running out of options, Beast visits the Sanctum Sanctorum of Doctor Strange and asks him for help. Strange decides to show him something, the effects of Wanda's actions and the repercussions of her magic. McCoy asks Strange if the spell can be reversed, but he says that the spell has spread across the multiverse, flowing through everything, welded to all there is. If he were to even try to break the spell, all reality could implode as a result. Strange shows Beast the multiverse, infinite realities where other variants of himself are trying to do the same thing, undo Wanda's spell and bring back the mutant gene. Beast finally sees how all of these lives are on the same journey, approaching the problem from different places and angles, and he realizes just how narrow his own experience is. Beast decides to visit a small village in the country of Transia and buys an old clock from a street vendor. He sits down to take a break, and a woman who looks very similar to Wanda says hello. She tells him the clock he just bought is fake, probably made in China, and will likely break in a few days. The woman asks Beast if she can tell him a story. A man and his wife were fighting and screaming at each other, and the man says his wife always puts him down and he wishes she had no eyes if she sees so little good in him. The magic comb tingled strangely under his fingers, and he realized he'd said too much. But the words were already uttered, and they couldn't be unsaid. At that moment, his wife was struck blind, her eyes sealed over with smooth, unbroken skin. Furious with her husband, she grabbed the magic comb and wished for her husband to have 1,000 eyes, to see how foolish he actually is. Eyes sprouted all over the man, on his hands, his arms, his chest, everywhere. He turned into a monster even stranger and uglier than his wife. After blaming each other and arguing about whose fault it was, the husband grabbed the comb and wished that they just had 4 eyes between them once again. And the wish came true once again. The wife now had 3 eyes, and the husband had only 1 giant eye in the middle of his face. The man later returned to the sea and gave the magic comb back to the mermaid, who said she also has a magic earring if he wants. Beast wanted to continue talking to this strange woman he had just met, saying that she reminds him of someone, but she had to leave. He then left Transia and went back to Neverland, the mutant camp where hundreds of mutants were experimented on and eventually killed. He wanted to give all of them a proper burial and dug graves for all the dead bodies he could find, remarking that he gave the past its due, which is all you can do in the end, for the dead and for the past.